Welcome to Melt University. This series will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Now, here's your host, the president and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Virtual Melt University. We're rolling into the fall semester, virtual fall semester of Melt University. Many of you students are back on campus in some shape, form, or fashion, virtually, hybrid, your dorm, campus, Zoom. But we are continuing to evolve and roll on with the program. Tremendous feedback from the listeners. But I have a very, very special guest joining us today, and it goes back to also a testament to relationships. Randy Bernard, who's currently the manager, which is probably the understatement of the day, of Garth Brooks. But Randy and I met in the mid '90s. Never forget when I met him. These Cowboys strolled into Richard Scrushy's office, and I was like, man, this is unbelievable what they've done. And he and I have maintained a great relationship throughout the years, and the many in professional successes and endeavors that he's had. And one thing he's going to talk to you about today, with just had such a colorful and successful professional career, about, life is certainly not linear. You don't know where it may take you. You've got to be willing to take that shot, dive into the deep end, through the successes and failures. And to use a bull rider or cowboy analogy, you're going to get thrown off that bull sometimes, but you got to get back up on that sucker. So as I said, manager for Garth Brooks, which is obviously probably next to the Beatles, or maybe even beyond the Beatles, the biggest, most successful entertainer in the world. But started his career at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I hope I said that right, in California, starting his journey, but has been the just amazing CEO of some amazing organizations. I actually think was one of the founders of the Professional Bull Riders, but CEO of Professional Bull Riders, CEO of IndyCar, fascinating, CEO and president of RMG, which was a giant 61 million home set of networks and multimedia platform, as well as a board member, and I'm sure of many organizations, National Cowboy and Heritage Museum, Teammates for Kids. So Randy, welcome to Virtual Melt University today. I've been really looking forward to sharing your journey with our listeners.
Well, thank you, Vince. It has been a long time. It's been 20 years that we've had a relationship. It doesn't seem that long, does it?
Well, I guess, in my mind and your mind, we still see ourselves sort of as, 29 years old. And obviously, we're not, but it is a testament to, building and maintaining and nurturing relationships over time. People go in and out of your life, but we talk about the value and importance of that. But before we kind of jump in and dive into the deep end, tell our listeners what you're doing right now with and for Garth, and then we'll kind of come back up to that, because as we talk about your career journey, but I'm sure every day is so fascinating working for somebody at his stature and magnitude.
Yeah, it's been probably one of the most remarkable jobs, and I've had some amazing jobs in my life working with Garth. I co-manage him with a gentleman by the name of Bob Doyle that's been with him over 30 years, who started him back, in the late 80s. And they've both been a blessing in my life. I mean, first of all, Bob has just been so gracious on helping me learn the music world, and so has Garth. And I mean, you never meet a more humble man in your life than Garth. I look at Garth and go, my God, here's a guy that's on top of the world, but he always has the time to sit down and talk to people and just make sure people feel like they're important. And I if there's a biggest lesson I can take from Garth, is how he treats other people and how he just how giving he is. And it's been like I said, it's been a blessing for me to have an opportunity to work with Garth.
So, and it's interesting because back, in my Health South days in my professional life, other professional life, I actually got to spend a day with Major Bob. He came to Birmingham and he was checking out some of our aviation, and obviously with his background. And then I had the privilege to spend a day and an evening with Garth. We actually flew on the Health South jet to Washington. We were lobbying on behalf of the music industry and the copyright, and flew back with him. And to your point, I'll never forget. First of all, you're in awe of his presence, but then you're like, man, this is the just the nicest, Oklahoma boy that you're ever going to meet. But then at that time, he had this vision to actually buy the Los Angeles Rams, and this was 20, 25 years ago. But how he laid it all out was like so far beyond, and it's actually happening today. But how he had laid it all out, how he would have integrate the team and the logos into the stadium, and all this kind of stuff, and I was like, God, this guy is, it's he's just on he was different level and planet, and I'm sure, like I said, you're exposed to that every day. So tell us about a couple things. Tell us about what you do every day, and then the story behind how you actually became his manager, because it's a tribute to relationships and trust and nurturing all that. I recall you told me that story.
Yeah, first of all, Garth, called me about 7.5 years ago and said, "Listen, I'm thinking about going back and doing touring, and I'd love for you to be a manager of mine." And I was like, "Well, actually, I was just leaving IndyCar, and really enjoyed the Rural Media Group. We had 3 different networks that were all catered to the rural lifestyle, and they were doing amazing numbers. And I had ownership in a piece of it, so I really enjoyed that. And um, he'd asked me a couple times, and I really wasn't taking it serious. I'm like, Garth, you need someone like Irving Azoff or someone that with Bob, that is gonna bring so much credibility and have so much experience, and I just don't have it. I'm not from the music world. And Garth was dead set on bringing me on. He called me around 6 o'clock one evening. I was in Nebraska and said, "Hey, I know you're in Nebraska." He goes, "My plane is sitting at the airport. Go get on it. We'll have dinner, and I'll have you back by midnight, 1 in the morning." 2 days later, I'm in my same clothes. I'm still at his house, and I'm going to work for him. So he's a good salesman too. But
No, clearly um, he's clearly a very persuasive individual.
very persuasive. But it was, I just didn't want to let him down, was the only reason I didn't want to do it. And he told me, he goes, "Listen, I'll teach you the ins and outs the way I see it." And it's like I said, it's probably thank God I made the decision, because every day's been a learning experience, but yet every day we try to move forward. And he's, like you said, he's thinking, he doesn't think about tomorrow. He's thinking 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years down the
Mm-hmm.
road.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how, like on all this streaming, on where he thinks it could go, and where he'd love it to go, and how he's really always, and his focus right now is, how do you make sure that the creators, the songwriters, are making money? Back when streaming came in and Napster first came in, it basically took it to, you only bought singles on iTunes.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, let's say you had 20 songwriters on an album, you used to buy the album for that number one hit. Now you just buy that number one hit, and those other 18 songwriters are starving. And so
Right.
we've seen thousands and thousands of songwriters leave Nashville, or doing it just for a hobby now, instead of as a
Mm-hmm.
professional career, because there's just not enough money in it for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so that has been a very big issue of Garth, and just wanting to try to move the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and making sure that
Mm-hmm.
it's a Wild West show in the streaming world. And unfortunately, the laws that were written then, um, you know should be changed, but I think there's fear that we could go backwards on it. So Garth is always looking about the future and trying to determine how we can uh, move forward.
Well, not only is he looking out for the future, but he's looking out for everyone in the industry. And like I said, to your point, um, he's not a me guy. He's an us guy and a we guy, and I think even when he's performing, and you see that graciousness and that generosity out. But so let's take it all back. You grow up in California. Um, you go, and I don't really, I know a lot about you from the PBR on, but I know a lot about your growing up or you're going to college. But you go to college, and we talk to a lot of our kids and our students about a couple things. One is that no matter what it is, pursue your passion and pursue it with zeal. And college is that formative time, and and it's in but the campus is also the professional laboratory. But unpack and tell us a little bit about, I mean, you've had some of the greatest business successes in the planet, but where did this all start, and how did it start? Where did it start? You have this quiet drive about you. Where did that all start?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think the most important thing I ever got out of college was an internship. Because
Wow.
coming
Mhm.
when I'm in college, I'm like, well, studying agriculture, business management, but I'm not sure really what I want to do. And my family had farm and ranch, and I just didn't think I wanted to go back there. And I
Mhm.
had no clue what I wanted to do, and I'd never been anywhere really away from that farm and ranch to understand, what else is out there. And I think the internship really awakened me and said, oh my God, I fell in love with the Western lifestyle and entertainment. And I did an internship at the Calgary Stampede up in Calgary, Alberta,
Oh,
Canada.
wow. Wow. Uh-huh.
And I was able to work with Don Jakes, who was the general manager CEO at the time, and they had 37 managers. And to this day, I could name every one of those managers by name because
Wow.
they were all very at a time in your life when you're really trying to understand what you want to do, and all of a sudden this light bulb goes off and goes, "My God, this is amazing! This is what I want to do." You're just listening to every word they say and just sucking it in. And when I left there, I knew at that point I wanted to be in the Western entertainment lifestyle world, and that was the really defining time for me, and where I started taking life a lot more serious because I knew
Mhm.
exactly what I wanted.
Mhm. Well, and by the way, and what we talk about, so we talk to our kids about that. That ignited your passion. You didn't quite know for sure where that was going to take you, but it did ignite your passion. So coming out of college, where did the journey begin? Talk about the journey.
Well, so I did my internship, and after that, I went to the general manager, or Don Jakes, and said, "Don, I'd like to stay up here in Calgary." Well, he'd love to have me, but unfortunately, the immigration laws up there is you had to find two
Hmm.
Canadians equivalent jobs in America to stay. So when we knew that was going to be difficult, he called a gentleman, Maynard Potter, up at the California Mid State Fair, and
Hmm.
said, "Hey, why don't you give this kid a shot?" And Maynard and I had a good relationship already. I had family that was very involved in the fair, my
Hmm.
grandpa and grandma, and so he said, well, "Okay, I'll tell you what, come in and let's for the next 3 months." He goes, "There's 60 billboards on this fairgrounds that you can sell, and when you get that done," he goes, "we'll think about trying to bring you on full time." He goes, "But you got 3 months." And at the end of 7 days, I came back into his office and I go, "What's the next job, boss?" He goes, "You do not have all of them sold." I said, "I swear I do."
No
And when he
way.
told me I did, he's like, "Okay, I'll bring you on." And so at that point, I loved sponsorship as well. So I jumped right into sponsorship. I think the fair was at about $300,000 at the time I came on in that into the sponsorship department. And by the end of that year, we were at 1.2 million. And it was it was something that I wasn't having to, I'm not a good salesman until it's something I believe in. And I
Hmm.
loved the fair. I knew I could bring value to those people coming in. So it was an easy thing for me to position and really create relationships. And that's what I did. And to this day, they have so many of those relationships still there at that fair.
Yeah,
And
that's amazing. So how long did you stay there, and then where did you go from there?
I was there about 5 years, 4.5 years. And then I got this crazy call from a couple buddies, Cody Lambert, Ty Murray, and Tuff Hedeman. They said, "Hey, we're creating this thing called Professional Bull Riders." And they go, "Would you be interested in having one of the very first ones?" And I looked at the numbers and it was ridiculous. I mean, I could put on a rodeo for 30,000, and these guys, for no brand at the time, they wanted 100,000. But I looked at it and said, you know what? If we bring national TV, I can make this work. So we I created a business plan for it and gave it to our board. The board approved it, and it was an instant success. I mean,
Yeah.
sold out, massive. And I saw the value of. I'm looking at this, going, "My God, I've never seen something." It just captured you. And again, back to you talked about passion. This is where my passion really came out. Now I love this. And it wasn't a very short time later. They asked me if I wanted to be the CEO.
Wow.
And we, that very first year I was there, 1994, we had 8 events. My office was a 10 by 10. I called it a closet. It wasn't really a closet. It's exaggeration, but it was small. And I had a card table and a folding chair as my desk.
Wow.
And, I bought a $400 chair about 6 months later, and the board gave me so much crap for doing it. They're like, we don't have that kind of money. And, we'll fast forward. So that year we had 8 events. In 2008, we had about 225 events. We had, I went from just me as an employee to having about 150 employees. And I was building a 40,000 square foot office. And the board of directors, they didn't give me any hassle about any chairs or anything else I wanted at that time. We were rolling in the
Right.
money, and it was
Well,
really.
well, well. The interesting thing, and like I said, I think that you and I actually met in the mid '90s,
Yeah.
because that was healthcare and all that. But so everybody loves the Bulls. The movie 8 Seconds was amazing. I guess the Cowboys figured out they were 80 to 90% of the big show, why people were coming, to the rodeo, and then all these serendipitous things happen, and you make them sound so simple. Because I've been out Vegas with you several times where you're putting the world championships on, and just 9 million moving details, and obviously livestock and animals and safety of cowboys and all of that stuff. And again, but the common theme is that you've never, in your professional career and professional journey, you've never hesitated to take the shot, take the risk, dive into the deep end. And we tell our kids that the earlier now, particularly in this COVID and post-COVID world, the earlier they can do that, the better off they will be. To share your philosophy about the risk, and don't looking back, and not being afraid of quote unquote failure.
Well, I think that's one of the most important reasons I'm here where I am today. I first and
Mhm.
foremost, I think any company today has to be fluid. It has to be able to move on the go. And one of my favorites is Amazon. When we were negotiating a streaming deal with Garth on Amazon, uh, we were dealing with all the other different streaming companies, and there was so much bureaucracy. It would take 2-3 weeks to get answers. Amazon walks in our office, says we'd like to have Garth Brooks on our streaming. We'd like it to be exclusive. And we threw the number out. We sat there and talked for 35, 45 minutes in detail.
Mhm.
And they said, can we have 2 hours? And they were able to make decisions that fast. And I'm a big
Wow.
believer that you have to give the folks around you the amount of uh, responsibility, and let them make their decisions. If you
Mhm.
believe in them, let them make their decisions, or don't have them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that was very important, to find the right people to put around me, that were a lot smarter than me and did a hell of a great job of making sure that they were protecting the brand and our company. Um, and I think that was very, very important to our success. Is we never sat still. We always wanted to better ourselves. We had very high goals. And when you come from nothing, our total budget in 1994 was like $75,000. We had $105,000 in bills and 35,000 in the bank. And so when you're hungry, you've got to figure out every which way to make something work. And you're going to have we had so many naysayers said, oh, bull riders, a bunch of dumb guys, they'll never make it.
I remember it. I mean, they were just piling on all these great guys.
Oh, I mean, we took so much heat for separating ourselves, but we never gave up. We knew we had a great product. I mean, when you take the best bull riders in the world and you take the most athletic bulls in the world and you combine them with the danger and success that you see, it made for amazing television, and it still is today, and it continues to grow.
And by the way, you mentioned that word athlete, but I mean, these Cowboys are some of the best shape, in the planet, and everybody goes, well, I don't believe this and this and that. And it's 8 seconds and all that, but I tell you, I mean, you walk by these Cowboys, and I've always envied them because their Wranglers fit a hell of a lot better than mine do. But I was just and obviously many years later, I mean, the PBR is still rocking and rolling, and big companies and involved and buy into it and all that. But just an amazing, and our students probably are not aware that there are major marketing and sponsorship careers in the professional bull riding, as they are with all these other major sports organizations. And so I think that's a good enlightening tool. So then you go from bull riding to race cars. So I'm seeing a common theme here: really fast, really dangerous stuff. So I don't know if you're an innate thrill seeker or the thrill seeking organizations finds you. So talk about this transition from bulls to race cars.
Okay, so year 2000, I'm talking to my board of directors, and I said, you know what, we should have an exit strategy. And everybody was like, why would we ever have one? We're growing, we're doing well. And I'm like, no, I want to create one. So I went and met with a company at the time. It was Bear Stearns out of New York. Ken Langone put me in touch with them, and I fly up and meet with them. And they said, listen, we'll help you put a business plan together for a great exit strategy if you ever want to sell it or whatever. And so I said, yeah, I want to create a plan that if we ever do, that we can really show the growth and what is going to be most important to sell this company in 5 years. So they flew in, spent a week with me. We developed this.
So you're in Colorado Springs at this time,
Colorado
right?
Springs at the time, yeah.
But so that's where the headquarters. That's where the headquarters landed.
It was, yeah. Now we moved about 45 miles south down to Pueblo. They have this massive, beautiful place now, which I love. I built that back one of my last things I did there. But so Bear Stearns flew in. They sat down with me for about 7 days. We've created this amazing business plan. And every year we'd do an hour conference call after they look at my numbers, and every year it was double-digit growth, and they were like, Randy, you're doing everything exactly to plan. And on that 5th year, they said, Randy, if there was ever a time to sell this company, it's right now. This is a textbook. It's been an amazing run for you. And so I said, oh, that's fantastic. I said, I said, what's the next thing? And he goes, well, we're gonna do put the word out to see how many people are interested. It'll be very, very confidential, because I said, in our world, in the Cowboy world, if it ever got out we were going to sell, everybody would think we're going broke. So I said, I can't take a chance. Not even my board members want to know about this until something's true, that there's really a viable buyer for it. And so Bear Stearns came back to me and said, Randy, we don't have one. We have 17 that want to sit down.
Wow.
And I mean, everyone from Roy Disney to Viacom. I mean, it was so fun to Feld. It was amazing. I had never been to it.
Well, the biggest ones in the world.
Oh, and we sat there and I gave them my pitch.
So for our listeners, if you don't know who the Feld family is, they own and started Ringling Brothers Circus and Disney on Ice. So two of the most vaunted live entertainment in the planet buyers and Disney wants to buy the professional bull riders. I just want to
Right.
make that point.
And Viacom, who owns CBS. I mean,
Oh
we
yeah,
had some
just a little minor network.
massive ones. And every one of them was just a who's who, and because they weeded out and just said we're just going to meet with these, and we met with them all, and then they said we're going to do a silent auction. We're going to open bids up at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and it closes at 10 p.m. And I mean, I'm on pins and needles. I mean, I'm like, I'm hoping that I'm thinking, well, we started, back when it started, the guys put up $1,000 each, and there was 16,000 total dollars in our budget that very very first when it started. And I'm thinking if we can make 40, 50 million, we'll be happy. And at the end of the day, Viacom calls or sends their offer in at 125 million, and then Spire Capital comes in at right at 100. Viacom, 15 minutes after the process had closed, they called us back and withdrew their offer, and we ended up selling it to Spire Capital. We sold 65% of it to Spire Capital, and we kept the rest. And then about 4 years later, they turned around and we sold it again to William Morris Endeavor, who now owns it.
Right.
And it was a absolutely so exciting process. The entire thing was just one of my favorite times of my whole life. I mean, you have to remember the guys that started the PBR never did get to ride for a lot of money.
Right.
And so, my favorite day of my whole life was when I told my board members, and then Ty Murray and Cody Lambert said, let us three call the shareholders. And so we drew straws on who we were going to get. And Jerome Davis had been paralyzed on a bull.
Oh yeah.
Everybody, Daryl Mills was working on oil rigs up in Pink Mountain, Alberta, British Columbia, Canada. And I drew him first, and I called him. I said, Daryl, I called him at midnight. He had swing shift. I said, Daryl, I've got good news and bad news. And he goes, well, what's the bad news? I go, I'm going to sell the PBR. He goes, what's the good news? He goes, will we make 100,000? He goes, I said, no. I said, after tax, I think it's going to be somewhere around $4.1 million.
Oh my God.
I hear this sniffling, and then I hear him say, honey, get the Jack Daniels. We're going to dance all damn night. Oh. And it's the first time I ever saw Cowboys get emotional. Every one of them had so much emotion. And it was, I mean, I had the emotion. I'll cry thinking about it right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was the most special day of my life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the true American dream, and it gives me chills just hearing that. So you hit this home run. Obviously, and I follow it in the press and all that. It was obviously major press and all of that. So how in the heck do you get in the car business?
Well, so after I sold it, I had a 2-year commitment to stay and work with them. Actually, I'm sorry, 3-year commitment, and then a 4th year on the option. I didn't have to stay the 4th year, but they just thought because I've started, that was my passion in my whole life, that's where I would always remain. And I told them, I said, I'm not sure I want to stay another year. I want to venture out and do something new. I want some new passion. I didn't want all my eggs in the same basket.
Because this is the first time you had always been well compensated, but this was the first time you had sort of rang the bell, as they say in the business world as well, right? Because you had put many, many, many years of blood, sweat, and tears of building this organization. I mean, you didn't have an end game or an exit game, so this was a life-changing moment for you personally and professionally as well.
Oh yeah, this pretty much set my life up. I mean, after that sell, it pretty much made me. I
could have gone. You could have gone fishing.
I did do a little fishing.
right. I
found that I was really bored real quick, but actually,
you hear that a lot. The great entrepreneurs, they're like, I can only fish or play golf for so long.
Exactly. Well, so I told them, I warned them. I said, guys, I don't think I'm, and they're like, oh, they just didn't put much emphasis in coming and talking to me, and it wouldn't have made a difference. And I had a good friend of mine, Chris Cox, called me and said, hey, I just was with the owners of Indianapolis 500, and they're looking for a CEO. No, they'd like to talk to you because they'd like to do some, they possibly do, you could do some consulting for them.
Right.
So we had an event in Madison Square Garden in January. So as I was flying out there to it, I stopped in Indianapolis and met with the trustee Jack Snyder and a few of the family members. And I was just thinking that they're interested in me as their consultant. And I got back on the plane and flew to New York. And when I landed, I was quite surprised when Jack Snyder said, "Hey, we're interested in bringing you on." And I'm like, "Oh, great." I said, "Love to work with you." And he goes, "But not as a consultant. We'd like you to be our CEO." And it
Wow.
was 9 days before I had to either commit to the PBR for another year or I could withdraw or resign.
Wow. Wow.
And so I didn't have much time. I said, "Golly, I need to do some due diligence here, and I want to make sure I make the right decision." So I got right on a plane. I said, I need to know that the top influencers in IndyCar would, uh, you know, uh, back me and believe in
Mhm.
me." And I said, not having any type of race background, that's kind of scary to bring
Right.
someone professional bull riders into IndyCar. So I got on the
Because
plane.
the drivers of the stars.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I wanted to meet with not only the drivers, I wanted to meet with. I met with. I had 3 or 4 phone calls with the top drivers: Elio Casanovas, Dario Franchitti, Danica Patrick, and
Mhm.
then I wanted to meet with some of the team owners. And Roger Penske was leaving the country. I'll never forget. And it was on my birthday, and he goes, "Listen, I call. They had called him and said that tried to set something up. He goes, listen, he called me up and goes, at 10 o'clock at night, he goes, Randy, I'm so sorry. I leave for Europe tomorrow afternoon. And I'm unfortunately won't be back for a week. And I didn't have that much time. I said, well, what time are you going to leave? And he said, in the afternoon. I said, I'll get on a plane right now. And I landed I got there by 8 in the
Mhm.
morning. And I was in his office at 9. I spent about 3 hours with him, and it was amazing 3 hours. And
Mhm.
at that time, I knew I wanted to do this. And Roger was a big, huge supporter of mine,
Yep.
and it was a absolutely one of my favorite things I've ever done because it was such a challenge.
Right.
And this is public, but IndyCar, from the papers you could read that they lost approximately 30 million a year for 15 straight years
Right.
as they were competing with another competitor at the same time, Champ Car, that where they had split.
Right.
And so it was a very challenging time, and my goal was, of course, not to lose any money and to grow the sport.
Well, what it tells me though is that, and I remember that as well, is they wanted fresh eyes in the organization, and I just what I love I love about it is just you're just willing to just dive in that deep end, anytime. If you look at, you built this global organization with the Bulls. You work for another global organization. You work for a giant multimedia platform. And one of our producers, Zach, his father started Bounce TV and obviously sold that to Scripps. So we understand the level that you're playing on, which is amazing. So I want to step back a little bit to go forward, but so you're a very well known businessman and entrepreneur, and obviously everything else. But talk to our kids if somebody's trying to track Randy Bernard down and they want an opportunity to work in the music business, they want an opportunity to work in for Garth Brooks. What what are things that get Randy Bernard's attention from a young rising Randy Bernard? What are you looking for? Because we're trying to give our kids and our listeners and our students insight from the great leaders, because we were all once those ones that, well, these kids. But what gets your attention if they try to hit you up somehow somewhere?
I think the aggressive ones that aren't afraid to roll up their sleeves. I think
Mhm.
these guys, these kids that come in and say, "Hey, I'm willing to start in the mailroom. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to grow." And I think that's one of the most important things that you can do. I think there's unfortunately in this time there's a lot of folks that want to come in at 10 o'clock in the morning and they want
Mhm.
the that leather chair right from the start, and
Yeah,
but
we
to have
preach that all the time. It just doesn't happen that way, does it?
it doesn't. And the ones that there's too many people out there. There's too many young men and women out there that are willing to do that extra mile and to prove themselves, and they succeed in everything. I tell my kids that every time
Mm-hmm.
they are starting something. I'm like, don't think it's going to be easy. There's going to be tremendous amount of trials and
Mm-hmm.
tribulations in anything you do. The most
Mm-hmm.
important part of it is just never giving up and just making sure if you believe in it, just following through and
Mm-hmm.
do everything the best you can and don't be afraid if to start at the very, very bottom.
Well, that's what we, and I experience that a lot. And when we talk to this generation a lot, is that they, of course, you got the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, you got some unicorns, um, but there's no instant gratification. You've been grinding for many decades, and in spite of all your successes, you've been thrown off that saddle a million times. We could have a whole separate podcast about that, but there is no instant gratification. But if you're willing to work for it, then I think you're the poster child for the hard work, the American dream, and don't take no, and always keep grinding. At some point, but now Randy, you hit on something too. My theory is that the entry level job market, particularly in our industries, has always been brutal, but it's going to be a nuclear winter out there now because so many people are unemployed that are willing to take a lesser job for a lesser salary to get back in the game and begin feeding their families again, and it's going to further depress the entry level job market and the salaries. And so, what you're talking about is that you're going to have to. It's going to be a giant grind to get into this game now. Right? Right?
Oh, I completely agree. I think that you really need to have a polished resume, and you need to make sure that you follow up and try to call them and let them know that you're very interested. And
Mm-hmm.
those are the ones that are you just got to get that one break, and it's not going to be exactly where you think it's going to be, most
Mm-hmm.
likely. But you know what? If you work hard enough at it, a couple of the agency here in town when they bring their interns in, one of their they tell their students, listen, we want you out on town every night because that's where
Mm-hmm.
you're going to make your connections and you're going to learn and you're going to grow and you're going to meet people and that's going to take you to your next step. And
Mm-hmm.
that's such great, that I'm like, wow, I took that. The first 2 years I lived here, I tried to go out as much as I could because
Mm-hmm.
I did meet so many people in the music world
Mm-hmm.
and that's where you create your relationships. And I think from my internship to every day you get up, you're going to learn something, and if you're not learning, you're not growing, and to me that's
Mm-hmm.
very important.
Mm-hmm.
And in every job I've had, I've always looked at it as I've had to be passionate about it. I'm never going to take something. If you want to be a fisherman, just go be the best one, but follow
Mm-hmm.
your passion and your dream. And some people don't want to make a lot of money. I didn't start out with the PBR thinking we were going to make a lot of money. I wanted to make the Cowboys a lot of money, but
Mm-hmm.
it turned out that once everything came together, it just um, everything just everyone made good money. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and the same thing with IndyCar. IndyCar was a little different because I knew I was going to make great money when I started there, but it wasn't about once you start a job, it's nothing about it. It's all about the
Right.
passion for the what you're doing and how you're going to grow it. My goals there were I wanted to make it profitable. I wanted to make IndyCar the greatest racing organization
Mm-hmm.
in the world again. And we changed creating your brand. I mean, it was called the IRL.
Oh yeah.
I didn't like that acronym. I created, so I went back and said, we're going to call this IndyCar, period. I said, we have to separate ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons of race car series out there. We have to
Right.
be the best at what we are. And at the time, we were the fastest, most versatile race car in the world. And F1
Mm-hmm.
couldn't compete with that. And
Mm-hmm.
NASCAR couldn't compete with that. And I believed it was the what they should have kept that because that's
Right.
where
Right.
they could really have done some great branding.
But you sit on something. Um, the and we preach this a lot. The value of building and nurturing and maintaining relationships, because it really truly is who you know, not what you know. You got to know your stuff, but talk about your philosophy of because I use this analogy of relationships like a plant or a flower. You got to constantly be trimming it and grooming it and fertilizing it and watering it and giving it sunlight. Talk about your philosophy on relationships and how you approach that, and share your advice and wisdom with our listeners.
Relationships are one of the most important ingredients in business,
Mm-hmm.
and building relationships and just your database of contacts.
Mm-hmm.
Garth laughs at my phone because one day he was looking. I got a new phone and it took like 6 hours for it to download all the numbers. He goes, "How many numbers do you have?" So we looked it up, and I had 23,000 contacts in my phone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm a firm believer. Like, they want to say that they're the world separated by 6 degrees. I think it's less for me. I think I could say four.
I'd say
And
probably three or four.
yeah, I say that proudly. I mean, I have done. You know, I never had any hobbies. My hobby was meeting people and
Right,
collecting things.
right.
And I love that. To you, like you and I, we have we talk maybe every 6 years, 5 years, but
I know.
it's contacts that you just I've been proud to see what you've been able to do, and I follow you. I love watching what other people do, and it
Yeah.
helps inspiring me. Um, but I also believe one of the biggest things that you can always do is never burn bridges, and that's been a massive philosophy of mine that I've
Mm-hmm.
told my kids is listen, in life there's gonna be decisions you're gonna have to make that aren't
Mm-hmm.
gonna be good. The most important thing you can be is fair, and make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you try to make the best decision that you can. But you're
Mm-hmm.
going to represent the company, and there's going to be times that you will burn a bridge, but you have to make sure that you do everything in your power not to, because I think it's
Yeah.
really really important if you're going to have that that great reputation, that you just need to make sure that you're setting yourself up for it.
Right, and probably some of the greatest regrets I have professionally is is I burned some bridges I probably didn't need to burn, and I did it out of an emotional response because business is personal. Everybody says business is not personal and all that, but I think that's some of the greatest advice that they could ever they could ever have, and because we try to tell them in this process that they're beginning to enter is that you cannot take anything personal. If somebody approaches Randy or Vince and we say, no, it's not the time right now, it has absolutely nothing to do with that person, other than they didn't make a good impression or anything like that. But I think that's invaluable advice. So talk
I think
about I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think you touched on something a little while ago too about sometimes you got to jump in muddy waters. I think
Mm-hmm.
you can't be afraid to take chances, and when those opportunities come, you can't sit there and say, "Oh, I can't move from my hometown," or "I can't, I'm not gonna,"
Mm-hmm.
it's too hard to move the family here or there.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to grow and move from, I'm not talking from a family standpoint. I mean, I think there's a balance, but
Right.
if you've got to be able to jump up and do what's in the best interest of your family. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, and I think a lot of people, I've had so many people that will just turn something down because they just don't want to move. And I think if you really want to grow, that in
Mm-hmm.
today's world, that's going to be important.
Mm-hmm. No, I think, like I said, I've always admired, you know, your I call it ambidexterity or that ability, but from the perch you occupy now, and everybody looks at music and live events and sports and all that and concerts and festivals, really, really, really sexy, and it is. It's hard work, big industry, hard industry. But from the perch you occupy, where would you point our students to future opportunities and career and professional opportunities in quote unquote the music business or the music industry? Where should they be thinking about right
Well, I think uh, music law is going to be very important.
now?
I think promotion. I think promoters. There's always going to be, that's where artists are making most of their money is off of promotion.
Is the live performances because they're going to come back one day.
Correct, correct. And
Mm-hmm.
I think those would be the two biggest areas. I think your labels, your record labels, are going to be a big area. And then in technology, I think you have
Right.
everything from your on-demand, your Pandora, Spotify's and your Apples
Hmm.
and your Amazons to your internet radio with Pandora. But then there's always something new coming out. I'm looking at something new right now. I'm really trying to get my hands around um, called Sessions, and it's an amazing app
Hmm.
that allows artists to come on and young artists, and it's more than a tip jar. It's kind of a gaming experience where these young artists can make really good money. And um,
Hmm.
Tim Westergren, who founded Pandora, is one of the founders on this. And you know, that's another thing. You follow those great people, and
Right.
they're always going to come back and figure something else out that's really good. And so I'm a big fan of when you believe in people to stick by them. And I think Tim really has something here.
Well, and I think that's a great thing. And so this has been amazing. And as we wrap up, we always love to ask our guests, like, and not necessarily go tos, but particular books that you've read that have influenced you throughout your life, that non-traditional resources and methods of information, or podcasts you may be listening to, or give us an insight into some of the things that business things that Garth reads. I mean, what would you recommend for our students and our listeners?
Well, younger, like in my college time, I loved Norman Vincent Peale books because there was
Right,
such a
right.
positive attitude, and I didn't believe in that before. And all of a sudden, I mean, I saw, I don't know, maybe it was in my head, but I saw differences. But then, growing on, into where I am, I love Jack Welch's books. I think,
Right.
I really enjoy autobiographies and books that teach, have messages, whether it's help learning to deal with your employees, or
Hmm.
whether it's just new ways to anything that is going to educate me. I'm kind of my reading's mostly about that, and
Right. Yeah. I think we're nerds in that respect as well. Cause you always want to learn from the great ones. And then obviously you're a great one. You've got a ringside seat to the great one. I mean, this has just been so fascinating. We could talk, and maybe we'll come back on and do some more unpacking, as we see how this, how everything sort of rolls on. But Randy Bernard, um, the manager, co-manager of the greatest one ever, Garth Brooks. Um, Started an amazing career. I mean, this has been great. It's inspiring to me. Amazing career climb. But I think our listeners just hear your passion, yet they hear your humility, and they hear your servant leader, and we the founder, for goodness sake, or one of the founders of professional bull riders. Amazing career, CEO of IndyCar, CEO of RMG. Just amazing, and I've got a sneaking suspicion that he's probably never going to retire. So goodness knows where Randy will continue to end up in these roles. But we certainly appreciate your time today, and we appreciate you sharing your wisdom and advice with the students and listeners of Virtual Melt University. Randy, thank you so much.
well, thank you, and it's good to catch up. And I think I hope that if there's one message that comes across today is whatever you do, it has to be about passion and
Hmm.
loving it. And I think if you do it, if you're willing to do it for
Hmm.
nothing, the money will come. And
Hmm.
I think in today's world, it's just about just wanting to show that you can really do it, and want to have that heart and passion to do it.
Well, you have no idea how much you're going to hear from these kids. We tell them to always follow up and find you and send you a handwritten note and thank you and all that. So I think you'll hear from tons of our kids. But we really appreciate it, catching up, and we look forward to having you back on sometime again in the very near future.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.